All right. Well, it is 6:35, so we'll get started here. Thank you everyone for your patience and also for joining us tonight at the open house. If you didn't know, which I'm sure you already know, this is for the Sunset Drive Reconstruction project. This project actually began a couple years ago, and we're excited to be with you today to share the progress that we've had since our last open house and talk through some potential design options for Sunset Drive. Just a few quick housekeeping rules here. Please stay on mute during the presentation. We do have a brief presentation here we want to give. And then if you think of any questions during the presentation, be sure to use the chat box and write those down. And then after the presentation is done, we will address your questions live or via chat. So today, as I mentioned, we want to talk through some more about Sunset Drive and the work that we've done to date. We did have an open house, I believe it was a year ago now, where we were in front of the community and talked about Sunset Drive today, what we're experiencing out there, and heard a lot of great feedback from you all. So today we just want to talk through the overview of the project and some of the goals, recap some of that engagement to date, and then kind of the main event here is the roadway design options. We have 3 design options we want to preview to the public here today and get your feedback on. So we'll walk through each of those. Then we'll talk through a few key corridor locations that are key pedestrian crossings or intersections that we want to talk through. And then, like I said earlier, we will have an open discussion at the end to hear your comments about these design options. With that, I'll hand it over to Amber, and maybe Amber, you can introduce yourself and then you can begin the project overview.
Super, thank you, Nicole. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name, like Nicole said, is Amber Klein. I am the Hennepin County Design Project Manager for the project. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us tonight. We're lucky to be, I think, in the virtual world tonight instead of having to travel on some snow-covered roads. So overview, Hennepin County, along with the cities of Spring Park and Orono and the Three Rivers Park District are working together to reconstruct Sunset Drive, also known as County Road 51. The project is between Shoreline Drive on the bottom side, which is County Road 15, and Shadywood Road, which is County Road 19 on the top side. The project will also include the conversion of a northbound bypass lane at Shadywood Road and Sunset Drive to be converted to a dedicated left turn lane. The city of Spring Park will also be upgrading both their existing water main and sanitary sewer utilities and burying their overhead power in conjunction with this project. Construction is anticipated to begin in 2024. So Sunset Drive today, the current average daily traffic is just shy of 3,000 vehicles per day. There is a 30-mile-an-hour posted speed limit for the corridor. The existing roadway and underground utilities, which includes the sanitary and the water main, haven't been upgraded in about 50 years and are nearing the end of its service life and need replacing. The Dakota Rail Regional Trail crosses Sunset Drive between Spring Street and Northern Avenue. Thor Thomas Park is also located along the corridor near Park Lane. Both are used for recreational purposes and emphasize the need for enhancing features for people walking, biking, and rolling along the corridor. Sunset Drive currently lacks some good stormwater drainage. When stormwater can't drain properly, we have issues with standing water and over time erosion in some cases. It means the same water that comes off the roadway could end up directly in a lake, which carries chemicals, oils, and sediment with it. There is also limited features for people who are walking and biking and rolling. While having a good roadway is important for people driving, people are looking to use roadways to travel in other ways. Not having enough space for people to walk, bike, or roll reduces the ability for people to access nearby destinations, trails, parks, and local businesses. Next, yep, there we go. So we'd like to step through a couple of photos from the corridor. Some of these were used in our previous open house that we did. So this first photo is looking east at the Rock Van Boat Yards. The existing building lies close in proximity to the existing right-of-way line and presents concerns with vehicles entering and leaving the buildings. The existing shoulder is not well suited for people walking or biking. There is currently limited parking in this part of the corridor. There's also known drainage concerns on this east end of the project. So this photo is looking east at the Dakota Rail Trail crossing. There is need for enhancing of the trail crossing to minimize the exposure to vehicles for trail users and upgrades to the ADA access ramps. Next photo is of the Thor Thomas Park with the Park Lane intersection just in the background. There's known flooding concerns near the park and also the same need for enhancing for space for people walking, biking, and rolling. This last photo is looking east at the entrance of Lord Fletcher's. Again, there's a need for enhancing of ped crossings to minimize exposure to vehicles at the Lord Fletcher's entrance. One other thing that you can see specifically in this photo is just the aging infrastructure on the bottom, the kind of the crumbling road. So project goals. When we reconstruct Sunset Drive, we will be replacing the aging roadway and underground utilities, as well as adding curbs and gutter. We also want to make improvements that meet present and future needs of the corridor, which also includes the improving of traffic flow and roadway function at key intersections, enhancing features for people walking, biking, and rolling, including some traffic calming measures at key crossing locations, and overall improving trail access for both present and future needs. Our anticipated project schedule. So in the fall of 2021, we held our first open house for the project. Nicole will talk more about that in the next few slides. But since the open house, the project team has been working on some of these design concepts. I will also go into further detail on these concepts in the next few slides after Nicole. Today, we're looking for feedback from these concepts that we will be presenting. Once the feedback from this open house is collected, we will use this information to further inform our concept into one main concept design. So later this summer, we haven't quite decided, sometime this summer, we will hold another open house. Hopefully that one will be in person so people can see more, we can do more engaging and present that one design back to the public for additional comments before we move into more detailed design and then ultimately construction. Again, with the construction anticipated to begin in 2024. With that, I will pass it to Nicole to talk about some of our previous engagement, our engagement to date for the project.
Awesome. Thank you, Amber, for that overview. So like Amber said, in the project schedule, we began engaging with the public back in 2021, believe it or not. And the purpose of that first round of engagement was just to share some information on what Sunset Drive is like today, and then also hear what you're experiencing along the roadway, in addition to the data and the numbers. So through that, we've gotten a lot of great engagement, as you can see on the screen. We did have a digital online comment map that allowed participants to share their thoughts of Sunset Drive today. And we received over 150 comments on that map, which was great. It really helped us understand the known issues from the community's perspective and helped us shape the 3 designs that we're sharing today. We also had a few other methods of engaging. We had some signage along the roadway and specifically along the Dakota Rail Trail. So if people were biking through, they could learn more about the project. And we also did a series of emails. Maybe some of you participated in the Sunset series, which was essentially 5 different topics that we explored, talking about different improvements that could possibly be done to Sunset Drive. If you did miss those are posted to the website. I did paste the link in the chat here. So like I said, in addition to all this great engagement, it really helped us shape the concepts that we are going to be sharing with you today. And we thank you very much for participating in the process. So a couple key themes that we heard during our engagement can be seen on screen here. So one main thing that we heard a lot of was that speed was a concern. We do know that is a 30-mile-per-hour roadway today, and That can seem very fast if you're walking right next to the road because there is no known pedestrian facility there today. So we heard that. We also heard a desire for a trail or some sort of walking feature along Sunset Drive. In addition, we also heard some comments for a desire for additional lighting. A few more key themes here. We did hear a couple roadway configuration comments, such as blind corners or just sometimes trouble navigating some of the areas. There was also a desire to move some of the power lines underground because if you've been through there, you know that there are quite a few overhead. So there was a desire for that. And then there was also some conversation around, could we put a roundabout at the Shadywood Road and Sunset Drive intersection, which we'll talk a little bit more about here later in the presentation. So like I said, all of this feedback helped us, I guess, take the community's perspective and then build these three designs that we feel are suiting both the engineering needs with drainage, et cetera, but then also the community needs for connection and some of these other comments we heard today. So with that, hope that was a good teaser. Amber will preview the three design options.
Super, thank you, Nicole. So kind of our design concepts that we're going through. This first one is today, kind of what Sunset Drive is, kind of what it looks like today. So it consists of a rule section, which means there's no curb and gutter and the drainage goes down to ditches, with two 11-foot, roughly 11-foot drive lanes with roughly 6-foot outside shoulders on either side, again, with the minimum slope ditches for drainage. The existing right-of-way, public right-of-way, kind of at the very bottom of the graphic, shows that 66 foot. That's kind of where the existing right-of-way two lines lie. And all three of our concepts that we're showing fit within the 66-foot right-of-way. Next, I'll kind of step through these options. It'll be kind of more, we'll quick go through them high level. Again, they'll be available for further review on the website and through the survey at the end. So option one, we are proposing two 11-foot drive lanes with 6-foot outside bikeable shoulders. The 6-foot width does include both that 4-foot shoulder that's shown and a 2-foot curb and gutter width. On the west side, or the lake side on the left side, behind the curb and gutter will be a 7 to 10-foot grass boulevard space that kind of matches up to that existing right-of-way line. And then on the east side, or the right side, behind the curb and gutter is a 6-foot grass boulevard with a proposed 10-foot multi-use trail, with an additional 2 to 5 foot grass boulevard space behind that trail, again, to match into that right-of-way line. The on-road bikeable shoulders provide a space to kind of separate modes of traffic by their speed. This helps to provide more uniform speed, eliminating the slowing of vehicle traffic due to bikes within the drive lane. Super. Option two, so it's again the two 11-foot drive lanes with one 6-foot outside bikeable shoulder just on the west side, again on the lake side or the left side of the screen. Again, the 16 width does include both the 4-foot shoulder and that 2-foot clearing or curb and gutter width. On the west side or the lake side behind the curb and gutter is also, again, that 7 to 10 foot grass boulevard space that would match into the right-of-way line. On the east side, bikers have the option to bike in the through lane with traffic or on a multi-use trail. On the east side, the curb and gutter is a 10-foot grass boulevard. We're able to widen this space with the elimination of the shoulder and provide more separation for vehicle traffic from trail users. Again, the east side has a 10-foot multi-use trail with the addition of 2 to 6 foot grass boulevard behind the trail that matches into that 66-foot right-of-way line. And then option three is two 13-foot travel lanes and a 2-foot curb and gutter width. This width allows for snow plow blade width and snow storage, is kind of why that wider than 11-foot lane from the previous examples. Again, bikers have the option to bike in the drive lane or the multi-use trail on the multi-use trail. On the west side or the lake side behind the curb and gutter will be a 6-foot grass boulevard space and a 6-foot sidewalk, an additional 2-foot grass space behind that to reach the existing right-of-way line. On the east side behind the curb and gutter is a 10-foot grass boulevard. Again, we're able to keep that space a little bit wider with the elimination of the shoulder and provide more separation for vehicle traffic and trail users. Again, the east side has that 10-foot multi-use trail, an additional 10-foot grass boulevard behind the trail to the existing 66-foot right-of-way line. I see there's a couple of questions as far as, so our road does not really go, it's kind of more at an angle. So we assumed our traffic was more north-south. So the east side and west side being lakeside. And we thought with adding the lakeside as kind of our west side, if that helps to kind of explain the direction we're looking at. So we're kind of looking down the corridor as if we're looking towards, is it Shadywood Road?
Mhm. Yes, this direction would be as if you're driving up Sunset Drive towards like Lord Fletcher's. So you're driving that direction towards Shadywood.
Yeah. So again, these options will be available for closer review on the project website through our story map and our survey. You could kind of look at these and compare them a little bit more. So next we are going to work through, as we were working through these design concepts, the ones we just went through, we also call them kind of our typical sections for the corridor. A couple of key areas came up that needed a slightly different approach or more review. We started discussing those. These concepts are including of what we just talked about, but with some additional enhancements that would be needed at a couple of these locations. So the first one, Sunset Drive at the Dakota Rail Regional Trail. With high volume of pedestrians and bicyclists using the regional trail, additional enhancements are just desired at this location. Some possible features include curbing of the trail alignment to cross Sunset Drive at a more perpendicular angle. So that reduces the crossing width and provides a better sight line for both trail users and roadway users. Another feature is a raised median or center island, which is a raised area that is constructed in the center portion of the roadway. And this can serve as a place for refuge for people who are crossing Sunset Drive. Another possible feature at this location is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which is also known as an RRFB. So that's pictured in the bottom left corner, as Nicole is showing. That's kind of an example of another enhancement possibility at this location. Again, with the purpose of an RRFB is just to create drivers' awareness of the crossing and people to crossing. It's a button that you push that flashes to make drivers aware of somebody intending to cross the intersection. So the next kind of location is Sunset Drive at Thor Thomas Park. We understand Thor Thomas Park lies kind of in the middle of our project and is a great example for the importance of the multi-use trail. Sidewalks and trails are a proven safety feature that provide pedestrians their own travel space that is separated from vehicle traffic. So other additional items to consider when designing a new sidewalk or trail are curb ramps, which is needed to meet ADA accessible design requirements. So a possible added feature for this location is enhanced crosswalk enhanced crosswalk markings or some crosswalk lighting at this location. Our next key area is at Lord Fletcher's. So Lord Fletcher's being a high volume destination and with parking on both sides of Sunset Drive. Some possible features include, again, a raised median, which is a center island. That raised median, again, construction in the center center portion of the roadway that can serve as a place for refuge for people who are crossing Sunset Drive. Along with the raised median would be a designated crosswalk area through that median that would include ADA curb ramps. And then kind of at the tail end of our project, or the north end of our project, another desired enhancements to Sunset Drive and Shadywood Road intersections are converting the existing northbound bypass lane along Shadywood Road turning it into a dedicated left turn lane. Again, the raised median that we just talked about that would be in front of Lord Fletcher's could also continue through this intersection and then up to Shadywood Road. The raised median are spaces that provide for, we can use them to add landscaping that can be used to change kind of the visual cues of a roadway and ultimately reduce speeds as people are entering down Sunset Drive. A roundabout was initially reviewed for this location, but ultimately determined not to be a good fit for this location, just to ultimate space, availability, lake location, topography, and different features. So ultimately, again, like what Nicole said, is your feedback from original engagement really helped to shape this design. Kind of what we heard from previous engagement was a desire to add the sidewalk and trail along the whole length of Sunset Drive. A trail and sidewalk would help to connect the Dakota Rail Trail, Thor Thomas Park, nearby businesses and restaurants. We heard traffic calming measures are needed. So the adding of raised medians is one way of traffic calming measures for the project. Kind of applying a what we call a road diet by reducing space for vehicles and using it for bike lanes or pedestrian crossing islands is also a traffic calming measure. We've also heard the desire for relocating of the power lines to underground. We intend to work with the city to help aid in the process of undergrounding the power along the corridor in conjunction with the project. So with that, we can open up to questions and discussion. We can step back through any of the slides, the concepts, and we can answer any questions. I can review any of the chat function. Or feel free to raise your hand, or I'm not sure, Nicole, if you're able to see if we have a raise hand feature, right? Or in Zoom.
Yep, I can see those if they're coming up. We do have a couple questions in the chat here. So one question is more about houses that have hills or just grade differences. Would that be graded in, or how does that work if there is like an elevation difference where a trail would go?
Yes, those are all good questions. So kind of once we've started to look at some of those locations where grading is a concern, we don't want to grade too far back into a property, just as far as not having to tear down trees or redo pieces. So retaining walls might be used or needed. Some of that discussion will come once a concept is designed and we start to develop what those impacts will be to each property. We can have those discussions with property owners if they feel comfortable with, hey, I'd rather have it graded out, or I'd rather have a retaining wall to help with some of that grading. We start to look at that as an individual basis along the corridor.
Great. And then there's another question here about, do we need a second trail? And did we consider a sidewalk on the west lakeside only?
So the intended purpose of a multi-use trail is ultimately to use for bikers. A sidewalk is not technically used for biking. It's more for just pedestrian use. So we typically, that's why we're focusing on a multi-use trail, because that is intended use for bi-directional, both directions, for all users, where a sidewalk is more geared towards just pedestrian use. I think the sidewalk option, did we consider a sidewalk on the west lakeside only? We did not, again, because of that that desire to have a multi-use trail. the project.
Then there's a question here about right of way. Someone's asking what happens to the mailboxes and landscaping if the new sidewalk or trail impinges on the homeowner's property.
So in most of our cases, or in all the designs, it fits within that 66-foot right of way is public right of way, and that's the space that we are working within. If we need to grade within a property owner, we have right-of-way staff that that they help us to coordinate that. So there is some reimbursement or some compensation and pieces that we can do outside of once those properties have been identified. Mailboxes are part of that right-of-way. They go within the public right-of-way. The post service kind of has some recommendations on, or some specifications, I guess, better, on where those mailboxes will be at, and will likely be within that boulevard space. So the mail trucks can just drive by and deliver mail. But that's something we coordinate with Postal Service as we continue down the project. If there's existing landscaping that we impact on private property, that all is done parcel by parcel and discussed with each property owner and what that compensation is if we need to adjust or move or impact landscaping that's on private property.
Yes. Thanks, Amber. Another question here is the current roadway centered on the right of way today?
That's a good question. So roughly, yes. I mean, we're dealing with straight lines, and I mean, our typicals all show straight lines, but the roadway is not a straight line. Ultimately, mostly it remains centered currently today in the right of way. Some of our concepts do have us adjusting where that center of roadway is at to help balance out that impact and kind of remain not just roadway centered, but entire corridor. So to include the sidewalk or the multi-use trail, we're trying to balance that and move that within that 66-foot right way to kind of keep it balanced.
Great. And then there's another question here. So how does the trail flow? Is it going to be up and down for where a driveway is, or would that be flat? How does that look and work?
That's a good question. So we're lucky that we do have kind of a wider 66-foot right section, and that boulevard space, maybe if you want to back up, Nicole, to one of the sections, or one of the, either one of these. So when it comes to, ultimately the trail wants to run concurrent with the road. So it'll be kind of the same profile elevation of our proposed roadway. So when it comes to a driveway, most of the times that distance that we need to account for the grade elevation is done in that 7-foot boulevard or 7 to 10-foot boulevard for wherever it is. So typically the trail is intended, depending on grading, sometimes that changes, but the intent is to have that trail run at the same, not elevation, but at the same profile as our roadway. So it shouldn't dip up and down for driveways, because that'll be done within that boulevard space. That grade differential will be done there.
Great.
Does that explain it? I know it's kind of three-dimensional viewing and talking about it.
Yep. So what you're saying basically is that the trail is more or less going to stay the same. It won't be bumping up and down, and that if there is a driveway, it will more so open in the curb and like boulevard area where it dips down, and then even back out for the trail. Yep. Great. We have another question about the trail here. What happens when it gets to Shadywood Road? Will it just end, or is there plans to tie into the shoulder or maybe a future trail?
Good question. So right now we don't have finite. It'll probably kind of just end into Shadywood Road. There is an existing shoulder on Shadywood that probably where we would tie into. We would again want to create an ADA access ramp at that location. So we're still kind of looking if we need to do it on all four corners of that, or if we just kind of do it on the two corners, the Sunset Drive corners of Shadywood Road. So that's, again, a little bit more final design, but the intent is it will tie into Shadywood Road.
Great. Then we have a question about assessments. When will homeowners learn about the assessment amount?
I do not have an answer for that. That is a city question. I'm trying to think if we had a discussion about assessments, whether or not
Mm-hmm.
the city assesses for these things or not. I don't remember off the top of my head. That'll be half the question we'll have to ask the city.
Amber, if it were to be assessed, Amber, when would a homeowner typically be alerted of that assessment?
Again, that's probably a question for the city as far as if they have a policy on it,
Mhm.
or what that policy is, that they might have to figure out what those fees are and adjust them. And I don't know, again, we'd have to ask the city when they typically do that in the process.
Okay, great. Now, then we have another question about maintenance. So who maintains the trails and sidewalk, and will the homeowners be responsible for that?
Good question. So usually the county maintains anything from inside of the curb and gutter, so the roadway piece, and then outside. Every city does it a little different, so I might want clarification from the city. Typically, as far as maintenance of the trail would fall on the city, but as far as snow plow removal, it might fall on, I think with the sidewalk, I know with the city of Minneapolis, the sidewalks fall on residents, but the trail falls on the city. So I don't know for sure when it comes to like snow removal, who will be responsible for that. But any like lawn upkeep, so all the grass boulevard would likely fall on the property owners that have that section within there that butts up against their property.
Mm-hmm. Great. It looks like Mike Anderson replied and said that the city does not assess for these projects.
Oh,
So
there we go.
So you heard it here first. and we'll double check with that too, and just make sure that when we have a summary of the open house, we'll address some of these key comments in that, and then we can have an official response there as well. But it seems like no assessments. All right, then we have another question here about, is there a specific month that you plan on starting the project? And is there a target completion month as well?
Right now we don't have a fully vetted design yet. I don't exactly know when construction will start. Some of it might depend on the burying of power lines. A lot of times we like that to be done before we come in with our construction. So it might have when the power company can come in and do that might affect where we start our project. And I don't know as far as length of project. It's a smaller section of roadway, but there's kind of only one way in and one way out. We've got a large amount of, we've got a couple of big businesses and along the corridor that we just want to be aware of as far as closing of the roadway, how we are constructing this with the city's utilities. Typical water main is about 8 foot down, and sometimes sanitary can be even deeper than that. So there's a big hole that we need to dig in. So there might be some time impacts for that. And it might, I can't even say how long the construction will be at this point.
And I will add to that, that at this stage in the process, we're still looking through the design. Once we select a design based on feedback, then we can, the county will kind of start to develop those construction plans. And that will be something that we would hopefully share at the next open house, where we can talk more specifics on design, or excuse me, on construction timing. All right, moving on. We have a concern here from someone who's on the east side, and they're concerned because they're basically asking, are you wanting 17 feet of my front yard to accomplish this? So I guess the essence of that comment is, what does this look like for me if I'm really close to the road? How will that work?
It's hard to say specifically where your project is at, but the proposed roadway fits it within the public right of way of that 66-foot right of way. So there is some specific areas that we might need to acquire small sections, like maybe a 1 or 2 swath of some right of way, but otherwise largely the project remains within the public right of way.
Mhm. And to add to that too, I think if there are those areas where there are, say, private features within the public right of way, we'll have those conversations in our right of way discussions and kind of talk through what that means for you as a property owner. Okay, then moving on, we have a question about what are the design ideas for the lighting on the sidewalk in multi-use trail? Or will there just be lighting from the street? Is there lighting on the sidewalk? And does the timing for that lighting differ from the overall street lighting?
So ultimately tonight, we're looking to kind of help foster what we want for a typical section for what are these concepts. It could be all, one specific option, 1, 2, or 3. It could be kind of, well, maybe can we look at this with that kind of piece. And then once that concept is identified, then that next steps is to look at lighting for the corridor, whether or not we want pedestrian level lighting, whether if it's just intersection lighting. There's a lot of discussion that can be had on that. So at our next open house, there might be more discussion on lighting, on what we want to see, being that it is a residential, largely residential street. What do you guys want to see for lighting? If it's lower level lighting, some trail lighting, just intersection lighting, that'll be discussed in more detail at upcoming meetings.
Great. And that kind of plays into the next comment here. It's be helpful to show some examples of driveways where they intersect with the trails at the next design discussion. And I think that will lead perfectly into kind of once we hear from the public on these 3 options and come up with a preferred solution, then we'll start sharing like the full layout of the corridor from end to end to say, here's specifically what it's going to look like in front of your house, in front of, whatever area. So stay tuned for that next open house, probably sometime this summer. And then we can also look at that and refine that depending on how things are looking from there. Okay. So there's a concern here from someone basically just saying, is the trail being built just for 3 destinations, basically Lord Fletcher's Park and Rock Fam? Can you talk a little bit more, Amber, about the purpose behind the trail?
Yeah, so ultimately, yes, the trail does connect the entire corridor, but it's for people to connect to those spots as well, to the Dakota Rail Trails, those businesses, and just for general physical exercise. It's used for other transportation purposes. We identify that there is a lot more desire for non-vehicle transportation, so that this trail is part of it, as far as whether it's commuters or people using it for recreational purposes, and ultimately to keep those people who want to use other modes of transportation separated from vehicle traffic, to help with that separation and safety piece of other modes of transportation.
Great. All right. Another question here. Would a homeowner be liable for someone if they get hurt on a trail or a sidewalk in front of their home?
I guess I'm not a lawyer. I don't believe that's the case. Ultimately, the sidewalk and trail are within public right of way. So it's not on somebody's private property. So I don't think anybody could be held liable if somebody were to trip or fall within that area.
And then we have a question about what is the width of the public right of way?
So kind of if any of these options at the very bottom, you can see that 66-foot right of way is the current, and what we plan to use for all of our designs is that 66-foot right of way. Again, as we have our design concepts, when we pick this design concept, like Nicole said, we're going to have a layout that has all this geometry on there that is placed over top of, so where these are very general in terms, and that's kind of what we want to keep them as, just to understand basic concepts. Once this concept has kind of been refined more, it'll be general physical lines that we're going to have on a layout over an aerial image that shows exactly where all this stuff lies on Sunset Drive.
All right. We have a comment here specifically with a business, and they're confirming that it's been considered for right of way for clients and residents to have access to entering Lakeview, the Lakeview Lofts building. I think that seems like something that's going to be a next step discussion, as well as, once again, the specific impacts to that business and what that design is going to look like directly in front of that property.
Yeah, that's,
And then
sorry,
and
go
then
ahead.
you're good. And then we have another question about the right of way again.
Mm.
So the question is, so is there currently 66 feet and it's not being enlarged or maybe utilized, they meant?
Yeah, exactly. No, we don't intend to take any large chunks of right of way. There is, in some cases that we've started to look at these designs, we're at intersections where we're turning a corner, or because of the nature of the roadway, there might be some spots where we do have to purchase right of way from a property owner. It would be very minimal in nature, like I'm talking maybe 1 or 2 feet in like a section or a linear piece, but not in every case. In most cases, we don't need to. We're staying within that right of way for permanent roadway infrastructure. Where that differs is where what we call temporary easement, where we need to, as we're building the roadway and need to connect or tie into the existing properties along the roadway, there might be some temporary grading that we might need to accomplish due to burying the utilities or the power, or redoing sanitary and water main services might have to impact some of the property. So that there will be some temporary easements that need to be dealt with in right of way, but largely not a lot of permanent easement will be taken.
Great. And then we just have a question about, are these options truly feasible considering all the properties along Sunset Drive? And just acknowledging that some houses are very close to the existing road.
As far as we've looked, as we started to look at through all these designs, we believe they're all feasible, and that's kind of why we're showing them all tonight. Is that they all fall within that right of way, and no houses or properties fall within the county's right of way specifically that way.
Okay. Couple more questions here, and I appreciate all these comments about right of way, because that's been a lot of our internal discussion too, is just kind of talking through today. Really, the road, it looks a lot more narrow than the right of way allows. So I guess just to expand on that, there is 66 feet of space available in the public right of way currently.
Yes.
Like it's shown on screen, it's not utilizing all of that space currently. And that's kind of where we're exploring, well, what could we put in that right of way space to help meet some of those project goals?
And when we're looking at this example, something else that it's like the existing, if you want to go to the existing, there you go, Nicole. What we're really not showing here outside of that shoulder area is drainage area. So where there's probably a lot of ditch sections that run through here that kind of also take up that space that's there used for roadway purposes. Yeah, just like all of this is kind of where that extra drainage space is used, or where that other additional 15 feet on either side is kind of taken up in that right of way. Some of it is not being utilized, and when we start those right of way discussions, they typically will lay out where the existing right-of-way line is. And sometimes it is very surprising for property owners where that actual line is at.
Mhm. So Amber, can you speak to a little bit what the next step is as far as right-of-way discussion? So if you are a property owner listening on the call today and asking some of these questions, like what is the process for that and when would that typically begin?
So usually we start those discussions shortly after our 60% plans on a technical basis, which I would expect probably later this fall for us to be, or maybe even into the winter, to have those discussions. We'll try to make it early on as winter as we can, so our right-of-way agents can get out there. And be able to have our surveyors go out and lay out those lines for property owners to kind of see where the existing right-of-way line is at, and then the other part being what is the impact to people's properties. Some of that might be for grading, some of that might be for having to dig out and replace utilities, and that part usually goes at our 60%, which would be hopefully this fall. With the right-of-way agents go out and talk with or meet with each property owner at that time. Usually there's a multitude of weeks and months that process goes through as far as negotiating impacts, and if people have questions as far as things that are in the right-of-way that if need to be adjusted, we leave time for relocating of landscaping as needed. Or if there's special other momentum stuff that's within that right-of-way piece, we allow property owners to move that outside of the right-of-way as desired.
Great. And then we have a specific question here about the Rock Fam boatyards, just noting that they do have, people who are coming and going with forklifts directly from their property a lot. And with the trail crossing near that, how will that kind of work with that interaction with pedestrians, and how can we ensure that's safe?
Those are good questions. That's something we'll have to kind of talk on an individual basis as far as the circulation within the Rock Fam properties themselves, being that there will have to be more defined driveway locations. So those will be identified. So as people, just like anybody else's driveway, as they're crossing it, pedestrians and bicyclists have, the same awareness of crossing anybody's driveway as you're using the trail, is just to watch for vehicles. And that would have to be just as much at the business as well. The Rock Fam is watching for forklifts and boats that are being passed through between the two properties.
Great. And then we have a question again about the anticipated duration of the project. And I guess the answer to that is we're not exactly sure. The construction's intended to begin in 2024. Typical construction season is usually spring through fall, but we'll determine more of the exact timing once we have a design selected and work through the construction staging plans.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Well, things are quieting down a little bit. We'll take any more questions as we have them, but I think we're getting a lot of great key themes from this discussion. I think a huge one here is right away, and that's very well noted by the community here. And I think that our team will utilize that feedback and really think through, okay, what are we going to do to have these conversations and make sure that if you own a property and you're listening on the call, so that you have a better understanding about how this will impact you once a design is selected. So stay tuned for more on that, but we're definitely noting this conversation. Okay, a couple more popped up here. So there's more of a comment about, since the multi-use trail only goes from the Dakota Rail Trail to Highway 19 and ends, why not just make it a simple sidewalk instead of the multi-use trail?
We actually have intent to, from Dakota Rail Trail all the way down to Shorewood, we'll have, whether it's a trail or sidewalk combined, we'll have something going all the way down to Shorewood Drive. But the intent, I mean, ultimately we're tying into another multi-use trail. I don't even know the width of the Dakota Rail trails. It's probably 12 to 14 foot wide. So it's just a destination kind of to another destination. I do see there's a question on speed limit. So the speed limit issue comes up a lot on county roads. Currently, state law does not allow for us to change. Cities have the ability to, but the counties do not have the ability to change the posted speed limits for our roadways. I think maybe in the future we will have some variability in that, but right now we have to petition MnDOT for a change in speed, and then they would do something called a speed study. In our previous experience, we found that in most cases, speed limits increase when we do speed studies because they take the general average of drivers down the corridor and then post from there. So, but we don't have the ability at the county to change our posted speed limits.
Amber, could you speak to how the design will help lower speeds or calm traffic?
Yep. So a lot of kind of some of what I talked about in the presentation is putting in medians helps to, especially like medians with landscaping in them, just gives another vertical feature of the feeling of it's a tighter corridor and wanting people to slow down, or if people feel pinched and will slow down, is one of the traffic calming measures we have. Let's see some of the other ones that we're doing. The medians, kind of our road diet where we're taking the existing section and dedicating it more towards a bikeable shoulder. So reducing that overall travel lane width feel will also have the implication for speed reduction.
Great. And then there's a question about construction with how do you access your driveways and mail? And I think that's all kind of TBD. I will say that access must be maintained for residents. So you're not going to have to park far away and walk into the project area. That will be maintained. Obviously, there will be some disruptions to that, but in general, the contractor will work with you to get in and out, and your mail will still be delivered, your packages, etc.
Yeah, in most cases, sometimes the Postal Service will ask for like one general location, so they don't have to send their trucks through the corridor. So there might be one general location where we put mailboxes to pick up mail. Again, driveway closure, the intent is for it to remain open during construction, but there will be times of limited interruptions. Having to replace utilities is a 8 to 10 foot hole that's going to be in the roadway to get down there to replace utilities. So it's hard to cut down that deep, replace that utility and get it back up to grade so people can drive over it. So there might be some slight interruptions, but again, more details to come once we've identified our design and understand more of the construction and how we can construct the project.
All right, we have some more good comments coming in. One is saying, can you consider an option 4 that would look like option 1, but have the trail going down the lake side instead of the east side?
I think it's a possibility. I think kind of just in general discussions, the lake side has got smaller properties to it, and more of the destinations, the Thor Park being one of them, are on the east side. So I think kind of in just some general discussions, the idea to keep the trail on the east side was kind of the best alternative. But we could, I mean, definitely put that in the survey notes, and we can kind of pull that to see if that's desired. We can look at that option.
Yeah, and we had another comment kind of echoing similar thoughts, and we're kind of getting to that portion too. We do have a survey. There's also a question of, are you engaging with residents who live on this area. Have you surveyed them? This is the official unveiling of these three concepts tonight. So we do intend to promote these options and gather feedback from folks. There is going to be a project survey posted on the website with these options, and you can select if you're a resident or a community member. So we do intend to engage with the residents in that way. Yeah, and like I was saying, getting some more comments here about the possibility of moving the trail to the lakeside. I think that's some great commentary that the design team can look at. And also, like I'll put a plug for the survey again. Please be sure to share that survey with your neighbors and other community members so that we can hear more feedback on these designs.
No, I'm curious on, I do see a question about it being overbuilt. I'm not exactly sure what you guys mean by overbuilt.
It seems like through scanning some of these comments, and people can feel free to comment on Amber's question, but I think maybe people are feeling like adding a trail and shoulders and a sidewalk might be a lot for an area that is not utilizing that full space today. So maybe there's a general concern that, you know, why are we trying to fit more features within this area? And then
Yeah, in general, I mean, like option one has got the wider of the road sections. The other ones all are reducing a little bit of that road section. But the addition of curb and gutter is really needed down this corridor. There's a ton of drainage concerns, low spots, sitting water, and all trying to get that into some pipe system or some infiltration or filtration basins that we could construct within some of this green space to ultimately reduce the solids that get put into the lakes that kind of go there now. In a rural kind of situation is what you guys are in right now, where it just drains off the roadway into the kind of ditch section, slope sections, and then ultimately that finds a way to the lake.
Got a few comments here about people excited for the possibility to have safe walking and biking along the road. I'll flip through these designs once again. And like Amber said, we will be uploading all of these concepts and this information to the website tomorrow morning, essentially, to make sure that people can review this information and take that survey and provide your feedback. There will be some guided questions, but then also an open-ended comment box at the end, so you can share your specific ideas as well. Well, looks like we're winding down a little bit here. I will reiterate, like I said, this is the first time we're unveiling these three options after months and months of work of analyzing the roadway and what could be best for the community. But we certainly want to hear from you. We really appreciate the discussion here tonight, and be sure to take that project survey. I'll flip here. I'm sorry, I was ahead. So like I said, we have the project survey live. It will be posted to the website tomorrow morning. And we really want to hear from the community. And we're having a one month, a little over a month comment period here to share your feedback and look at the designs, analyze those, and provide your comments. So you can scan the QR code if you have your phone handy here tonight and take that early here now. But like I said, we will also be posting the website and other educational materials to the website tomorrow, along with this meeting recording. So if you want to review any of the materials that we talked through tonight, you can certainly do that. Like I said, we do have our project website and we'll be posting this information tomorrow. So please do visit and view the educational materials and take that survey. And be sure to share the survey with others too who might not know about the project, who live in Spring Park or along this area, because we certainly want to gather that feedback and make sure that the design that is selected reflects community needs. It seems like we're winding down here. We had some great discussion today. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking time out of your evening and sharing your comments. We do hope that this presentation was helpful, and I'll say it once again, at risk of sounding like a broken record, but we will be uploading this to the website, and be sure to take the survey. Amber, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts too.
Not necessarily. No, I think you covered it. Just thank everybody for attending, and yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback. That's kind of why we brought these three concepts to everybody today, to whether you're picking a concept or you're giving feedback on other alternatives or things you'd like to see or don't want to see on the corridor. We want this roadway to reflect what residents and users and trail users of it, or just general users of the corridor would like to see for the road.
Awesome. So with that, we can sign off here. Amber and I will hang around for another minute or two if anyone has any remaining questions. And I will paste the survey link in the chat here for those who may have missed the QR code on the screen here. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.